Necrotic damage is the 9th best damage type in D&D when looking at how many creatures in the monster manual either resist or immune it compared to other types of damage. So if for whatever reason you're looking for spells that can deal this type of damage, in this list we'll be going over some of the best spells in the game that technically deal this type of damage. And starting us off at number 10, we have Hex. This is a first level concentration spell that lasts up to 1 hour and has a range of 90 feet. It uses your bonus action to cast, and what it does is allow your attacks to deal an extra 1d6 necrotic damage per hit against a creature you curse with this spell. The target will also have disadvantage on ability checks that you decide for the duration of the spell, and if that target's hit points reaches 0 before the spell ends, you can use your bonus action on a turn afterwards in order to move it to a new creature. It does require a remove curse spell in order to end the spell early, however, this isn't normally a problem since most creatures affected by Hex will likely die before having the chance to have it removed. This is available almost exclusively to Warlocks, but can also be learned by Aberrant Mind Sorcerer subclasses or the Hexblood race. Another way to learn this spell is through the Magic Initiate or Fey Touch feats, which allows some pretty good flexibility amongst other classes. On the surface, this spell seems pretty decent for what it does. More damage is usually a good thing. However, if you're playing a Warlock, the problem with Hex is that adding 1d6 isn't actually as good as it sounds. You see, because of the way this spell works, the best way to use this spell is to combine it with an attack that hits multiple times, such as Eldritch Blast, a cantrip that fires a bolt a number of times based on your level. So at level 5, you can fire 2 bolts of Eldritch Blast in a single casting for 1d10 force damage per bolt, while adding another 1d6 necrotic damage each time they hit. And if you tack on the very rare magical item Illusionist Bracers, in order to allow you to cast Eldritch Blast again as a bonus action, as well as having taken the Agonizing Blast invocation, allowing you to add your Charisma modifier to Eldritch Blast's damage every time it hits, along with any of the other Eldritch Blast invocations, then you have a very formidable attack that's only enhanced further by using Hex. However, the problem with doing all of this is the fact that Warlock spell slots are very limited compared to other classes. Basically, the way Warlocks work is that they can cast any of the spells that they've learned at the highest possible level, with the caveat being that they get so few castings per rest. And if your DM doesn't allow frequent short rests, every spell slot you expend is a precious resource that is better spent on casting a spell that isn't Hex, since the benefits of Hex are heavily outweighed by casting something like Hold Person in order to paralyze an enemy humanoid and allowing all of your party members to critically hit against them, or even Hellish Rebuke in case you take a stray arrow and want to deal a fair amount of counterattack damage as a reaction. On the flip side, however, Hex works really well with martial classes, since it doesn't require a spellcasting modifier in order to hit with it. It just sort of happens. And since it's only a bonus action to cast, this frees up your action so you can freely use it on the same turn you take the attack action, and combos really well with the extra attack feature. So, if your level 11 champion fighter, for instance, wakes up choosing violence and wants to make the most out of his or her damage, they can use their bonus action to cast Hex, then follow up with 3 attacks with its greatsword, thanks to the extra attack feature, then Action Surge in order to make another 3 attacks resulting in 66 extra necrotic damage total, on top of the 12d6 slashing damage from his greatsword. And then we add in the extra damage from their strength modifier per hit, which will result in some pretty hefty damage. And because of the way Critical Strike works in this game, the extra 1d6 becomes 2d6 instead. And since champion fighters can crit when they roll a 19 or 20 on attack roll thanks to their improved critical class feature, it is slightly easier to achieve this. There are plenty more examples of how Hex can benefit other classes, but the most common involve using it with your extra attack feature more than anything else. But the reason this spell only takes number 10 spot on this list is because you kind of have to build for it outside of playing Warlock, or being a very specific subclass or race. And sacrificing your ability score increase or feat slot just to be able to do an extra 1d6 necrotic damage can be a huge commitment, since both Magic Initiate and Fey Touch only allow you to cast Hex using their feature once per long rest, unless you're a spellcaster. In which case you would be allowed to use your own spell slots for Hex, but only for Fey Touch. Magic Initiate is just a one and done deal in regard to the spells you can cast using it. So while there may be some fun and niche use cases for the spell, the fact that better options exist a majority of the time is what keeps this spell from being higher on this list. And at number 9, we have Sapping Sting. This is a cantrip that has a range of 30 feet and deals the lowest damage out of every cantrip, but with the added effect that your target falls prone, unless they succeed a Constitution saving throw, in which case they neither take damage nor fall prone. Only dealing necrotic damage on a d4 is pretty bad on a cantrip. However, this low damage is bounds around the fact that it makes the target fall prone as well, which will make it easier for your melee party members to hit them, as well as effectively reducing the creature's total movement, since it takes half their movement in order to stand back up on their turn. This is a really powerful effect for a cantrip to have, as it's kind of broken if it functioned any other way. You see, the cantrip targets the creature's constitution stat, which is the worst stat to target because most creatures have very high constitution to begin with, making this spell harder than others to land on hit. So you're taking a huge gambling risk in order to have a chance to make a creature fall prone when you could have, instead, used something like Firebolt in order to get some decent fire damage going, or Toll the Dead, which requires a wisdom saving throw, a much better stat to target. But if you manage to pull it off, You've basically given your party a huge advantage in combat since you now don't have to commit as many resources in order to take out that target. And with features like our Chronorgy Wizard's Chronal Shift class feature, which forces the target to reroll their Constitution saving throws and use the new roll, there's a pretty good chance you'll get some effective use out of the spell. Silvery Barbs also exists, which is a first level spell that forces a creature to reroll an attack roll, ability check, or saving throw, and then take the lowest roll while also providing you or an ally with advantage on their next attack roll, ability check, or saving throw yourself. What makes this cantrip truly unique, however, is the fact that it's only available to 3 very specific subclasses. Death Clerics, which is available through the Dungeon Master's Guide, as well as Chronergy and Graviturgy Wizards, both of which are available through Explorer's Guide to Wildmount book, which was written by Matt Mercer and published by Wizards of the Coast, the company that made the game. And since the cantrip is also only available in Wildbound, there's a good chance you haven't seen it or won't see it, or either the Wizard subclasses, since the EGW isn't currently allowed in Adventures League. And even outside of Adventures League, it might still be uncommon to see, but still worth talking about considering the book is considered official material by Wizards of the Coast. With that said, the reason this spell only takes number 9 spot on this list is because it still only deals 1d4 necrotic damage, eventually hitting 4d4 damage on level 17, for an effect you can achieve by just using the first level spell Grease, which covers a 10-foot area square and turns into difficult terrain, while also being on a dexterity saving throw, which isn't that much better, but still better than targeted Constitution. Grease also persists for 1 minute without using your concentration, and causes other creatures to become prone if they happen to enter the area that Grease covers. And at number 8, we have Time Ravage. This 9th level spell forces a wisdom save on a target, dealing 10d12 necrotic damage on a failed save, or half as much on a success. In addition, on a failed saving throw, the spell also rapidly ages them to the point where they only have 30 days before they die of old age, while also suffering disadvantage in all attack rolls, ability checks, and saving throws. These effects can only be cured through the use of a wish spell or greater restoration cast at 9th level. There's also a huge investment needed in order to cast this spell in the first place, as it requires an hourglass filled with diamond dust worth at least 5,000 gold, which is consumed when you cast this spell. This is another spell exclusive to the Explorer's Guide to Wildmount and functions as one of the capstone spells for the Chronergy Wizard. And while 10d12 necrotic damage isn't great, the fact that you can age a creature to the point where they are functionally useless at an instant without actually killing them is extremely good, because this allows your party to interrogate a very important figure that might be close to the big bad evil guy. And with disadvantage in all saving throws and ability checks, they would find it very difficult to lie or protect certain secrets. And even though this spell targets Constitution, Chronergy Wizards get 2 very powerful features that allow them to effectively force this spell to work. The first we already talked about, Chronal Shift, but the second feature they have is called Convergent Future, which effectively allows you to ignore the number rolled on the dice and decide whether the number rolled meets the minimum requirement to succeed or 1 less below that in exchange for 1 level of exhaustion. So if your spell save DC is 20 and your target rolls a 16 while having a +6 to the Constitution modifier, you can instead ignore that and say the target rolled a 13 instead, which is only a 19 total, resulting in a failure. But the reason this spell only takes number 8 spot on this list is because it does require you to play a specific subclass and take a very specific spell in order to use it in the first place, which severely limits the flexibility and versatility this spell could have. Spells like Booming Blade or Eldritch Blast are considered really good spells, not just because of their effects, but because they're able to be splashed into other subclasses for a variety of different reasons. Time Ravage isn't a spell that can do this, and because of that, cannot possibly be placed higher on this list. And at number 7, we have Finger of Death. This is a 7th level spell that works similarly to the 6th level spell Disintegration, where it deals a huge amount of damage followed by an effect that activates whenever the target reaches 0 hit points. In this case, you deal 7d8 plus 30 necrotic damage, and turn a humanoid creature killed by the spell into a zombie under your permanent control at the start of your next turn. This spell has a range of 60 feet, and the damage can be had by succeeding a Constitution save. On its own, this deals less damage on average than Disintegrate, but, unlike Disintegrate, does have the advantage of only dealing half as opposed to not dealing any if the creature you're attacking succeeds in their saving throw. Unfortunately, only being able to raise zombies from corpses of your enemies is underwhelming for a 7th level spell, because zombies tend to be on the weak side with very little hit points and low attacking stats. However, if you're playing as a Necromancy Wizard, then this spell becomes a little bit more useful since all undead you control gain extra hit points and damage to the Undead Thrall class feature that you learn at level 6. And since there's no limit to how many zombies you can make with this spell, you can keep making undead minions for your ever-growing army as long as you're fighting humanoids, and as long as you're dealing the final blow with this spell. And since Necromancy Wizards can control a sizable army of undead with their Animate Dead spells, which also gets boosted by Undead Thralls by allowing them to animate 2 additional corpses when they cast a spell, the lower chance for your zombies and skeletons to hit is mitigated by the amount of times you're going to land critical hits, since you're rolling so many d20s for attack rolls. With Undead Thralls active, every hit is going to add up very quickly in terms of damage since they're also adding your proficiency modifier to their damage rolls. The true strength of Finger of Death lies heavily in how many undead creatures you can take control of, since you're adding more action economy to your team and also creating more bodies on the board, which might be able to take a few hits, which, in return, is damage your party members aren't receiving. Besides that, Finger of Death works really well as a way of dealing guaranteed damage onto a creature, even those with legendary resistances. Because even if a creature saves against the spell and you roll the lowest possible damage, you would still be dealing a minimum of 18 necrotic damage. However, the reason this spell only takes number 7 spawn on this list is because it uses your 7th level spell slot in order to cast, which are very valuable. Outside of Necromancy Wizards, the zombie that gets resurrected won't really be doing much in combat since they have low hit points and only a +3 to hit with its attack for very little damage. For the most part, you'd only rely on this spell for its guaranteed damage. And if it's damage you're looking for, there are plenty of other spells that deal a good amount of damage while also having additional effects that might help your party out overall, such as Rolomit's Psychic Lance, a 4th level spell that does psychic damage on an intelligence saving throw, and you can incapacitate the creature until the start of your next turn. And at number 6, we have Wither and Bloom, a 2nd level spell available to druids, wizards, and sorcerers that both deals necrotic damage to enemies within 60 feet in a 10-foot radius sphere, while also healing one creature within the same radius. The damage is equal to 2d6 necrotic, which can be had with a successful constitution saving throw, and the healing portion allows one creature to expend one of their unspent hit die in order to regain hit points equal to the number rolled plus your spellcasting modifier. Being able to heal while doing damage is incredible when it comes to action economy, because it helps you mitigate future damage to your allies by making enemies die quicker, while also keeping your party alive so they can play more aggressively. Since wizards and sorcerers, two classes that normally struggle with healing, both have access to the spell, this means they can help assist the support characters in keeping the party alive while still providing a decent amount of damage to hostile creatures. This works especially well if you have a fortified tank who has taken the durable feat in order to set the max amount of hit points restored when using your hit dice equal to twice your constitution modifier. And this spell works even better if the person you're targeting is wearing a perioptive wound closure, an uncommon magical item which doubles the amount of hit points you regain whenever you expend a hit die. This spell also works well with the Star Druid Starry Form class feature and choosing the Chalice constellation, since this allows them to add a 1d8 plus their wisdom modifier whenever they cast a spell that restores hit points to a creature. It's also worth noting that this spell's healing does scale pretty well, since upcasting to 3rd level or higher also increases the amount of hit die that the creature can use in order to heal themselves by 1 additional hit die. This is nice because not every campaign utilizes short rest incredibly often, and when they do, there's a decent chance you're not going to expend every single hit die you have, making this spell a great way to make use of an otherwise niche resource. The biggest downside to the spell is the fact that it uses the hostile creature's constitution saving throw in order to resist the damage, so expect to do very little damage very often. And the healing aspect of the spell only works if the creature has remaining hit die left to expend. However, there are 2 saving graces the spell has that keeps it from being any lower on this list, but not quite enough to make it any higher. The first saving grace is that it works as a healing and damage spell at the same time, which is not something a lot of spells can do if any exist at all. And the second saving grace is that the spell is the first AoE spell you'll learn that deals necrotic damage, which might come in handy when facing things that resist cold damage from Rime's Binding Ice, or thunder damage from Shatter, both of which are excellent 2nd level spells that deal a good amount of damage while also being on a constitution saving throw. And at number 5, we have Illusory Dragon, which is an 8th level concentration spell that's tied to 3 different rolls for 3 different effects. The first roll happens when you cast a spell in order to summon a huge shadowy dragon within a range of 120 feet of you in an unoccupied space, which will then force creatures that see it to roll a wisdom saving throw or become frightened of it for 1 minute, and you can only repeat the saving throw if they are out of line of sight of the figure. You can use your bonus action to move the illusion up to 60 feet and make it exhale a 60-foot cone breath of a damage type you choose out of the following whenever you first create the dragon: either ice, cold, fire, lightning, necrotic, or poison. Creatures in this cone must make an intelligence saving throw or take 76 damage of the selected type, or half if they succeed. And finally, a creature can use its action in order to realize the figure is an illusion by succeeding at an investigation check against your spell save DC in order to have advantage on saving throws against its breath attack. The illusion is also immune to all damage and conditions, cannot be hit, and always succeeds on all saving throws. Having 3 separate rolls for 3 separate effects works really well in the spell's favor, especially because they're good stats to target and have very good effects tied to them. Frightening creatures in order to force disadvantage on their attack rolls and ability checks while also ensuring they can't move closer to the illusion is fantastic crowd control to have. And on top of that, you get a bonus action breath attack which originates from the illusion, which means you don't have to put yourself in harm's way in order to deal the extra damage. And the save against the breath attack is an intelligence save, which is the best stat to target, meaning you're going to get the full damage from the spell more often than not. But what's really worthy of the fact is the fact that if a creature wants to see through the illusion, they must first use their entire action in order to try to pass an investigation check in order to determine that it's an illusion. And if the creature is frightened when it makes this check, it makes the check with disadvantage. But even then, passing the investigation check only grants the creature advantage on the intelligence saving throw that the breath attack requires, so it's still going to take damage from the breath whether it passes the check or not, and at the cost of the creature's action. For an 8th level spell, this one is great because it basically requires the enemy to be proficient enough in 2 stats and 1 ability check in order to be able to resist as many of the effects as possible. And with the amount of damage types available in this spell, there's a lot of flexibility when it comes to using the spell, especially since both acid and necrotic damage are the least resisted types out of the ones you're allowed to choose from. And all of this combined with being able to do a solid amount of damage to boot, which is what makes it deserving of the 5th spot on this list. And at number 4, we have Destructive Wave. We've gone over this 5th level spell before in our top 10 Radiant spells video, but basically what it does is allow you to create a wave of destruction within 30 feet of you that deals 5d6 thunder damage and 5d6 radiant or necrotic damage to any creature you choose and knocks them prone unless they successfully make a constitution saving throw in order to have the damage and suffer no other effects. Since this is a 5th level spell, it's meant to be the capstone spell for paladins only at level 17, which can combo really well with Holy Weapon, another 5th level spell they can learn at 19 and 20. Basically, you would use Holy Weapon to inflict extra radiant damage on all your swings, then use your bonus action in order to deal radiant damage to everything within 30 feet of that weapon, then follow it with Destructive Wave immediately after. This is a very powerful combo that can be achieved much earlier by Tempest Clerics, and not only that, Tempest Clerics can learn this combo as early as level 10. They can use their Channel Divinity Destructive Wrath feature in order to maximize the thunder damage that Destructive Wave also possesses. This spell also gives paladins a much needed AoE option, since they often have trouble fighting multiple enemies at once, and tends to deal more damage than any of the other attacks even when resisted. This spell deals good damage, lets you target who you want to affect, and lets you choose between radiant and necrotic damage. The only reason this spell isn't higher on this list is because the next 3 spells are learned much earlier and are a lot more versatile in how they can be used. And at number 3, we have Inflict Wounds. This is a 1st level spell available to clerics, divine soul sorcerers, and oathbreaker paladins. It allows you to hit a creature within touch range for 3d10 necrotic damage. It's a very simple spell with the highest amount of damage a 1st level spell can deal to a single creature at once, outside of Jim's Magic Missile, which can be spread across multiple targets. And because this is technically a cleric spell, it works really well with their action economy since they don't normally get an extra attack like other martial classes, so they don't have to worry about wasting Press's action economy for a single spell. If you are a Divine Soul Sorcerer, for instance, there are a few meta magic options you can use to play with this spell as well. You can give it a range of 30 feet by using Distance Spell meta magic, or even Twin Spell in order to cast Inflict Wounds onto an additional target within touch range. You can also learn this spell through the Shadow Touch and Magic Initiate feat as Martial or Spellcaster if you want more options for attacks. Spellcasters especially make good use out of Inflict Wounds because having a spell that deals so much damage to a creature can sometimes be a nice incentive for them to think twice about charging into the backline. And if you take the Warcaster feat, which allows you to gain advantage on concentration checks, but, most importantly, lets you use Inflict Wounds as a reaction in place of your opportunity attack if a creature moves out of your reach. The damage of this spell is so good that it can even be worth casting if you're looking to deal as much damage as possible in a single attack. And while not having any sort of secondary effect can sometimes be considered a downside for some spells, the fact that Inflict Wounds does so much damage for only being a 1st level spell with no strings attached, like Jim's Magic Missiles does, where it can blow up in your face for a smaller damage, is more than enough to make up for it, making this spell fantastic for taking the number 3 spot. And at number 2, we have Toll the Dead, a cantrip with a range of 60 feet that deals 1d8 necrotic damage to an unharmed creature, or 1d12 damage if they're missing any hit points on a Wisdom saving throw. The damage goes up 1 damage dice at level 5, 11, and 17 for a maximum of 48 or 4d12 necrotic damage. This cantrip may as well deal the most damage of every cantrip on this list, since there's almost always going to be a creature with missing hit points, since most spellcasters that can use this spell will usually have a lower initiative over martial classes in their party. So by the time the wizard's turn comes around, there's bound to be at least 1 creature that has taken damage. The only other cantrip that shares Toll the Dead damage is Poison Spray, which comes at the cost of only having a range of 10 feet and requires a Constitution saving throw while also dealing poison damage, the worst damage type in the entire game because so many enemies are flat out immune to poison damage. What's so great about this spell, however, is that it works extremely well as an alternative to other high damage cantrips. You see, spells like Firebolt and Eldritch Blast deal 1d10 damage, but require attack rolls in order to hit. So if you're fighting a creature with a relatively high AC, Toll the Dead is a wonderful alternative since it targets the creature's Wisdom saving throw, which usually lies in the middle in terms of how good the target stats can be. This is a really solid spell with a good range and infinite uses because it's a cantrip. It's also available to a wide variety of classes and subclasses, which makes this spell very flexible and easy to use with little commitment. The only reason this spell isn't number 1 on this list is because Toll the Dead doesn't also have a secondary effect to go along with its high amount of damage. And returning to the number 1 spot is Spirit Guardians. This is a 3rd level concentration spell that lasts up to 10 minutes and summons spirits that protect you and any chosen creatures within 15 feet of you. Affected creatures have their movement speed cut in half while inside the area, and must make a Wisdom saving throw upon entering or starting their turn inside of the area, or take 3d8 radiant or necrotic damage depending on your alignment. There is a lot of value you can get from this spell because of how many things are going on at once. Firstly, having a creature's movement speed inside the area is a solid effect because it makes it hard for creatures to escape the radius of the spell. You can also cast a spell in the middle of a group of enemies that your allies might be fighting in order to guarantee damage on any hostile creatures inside of it, since a 15-foot aura encompasses a wide area. This spell works very effectively as an area denial spell, since creatures might not want to risk taking 3d8 damage trying to get to the healer, especially once they know they might not make it back out easily. Because the aura is so large, your other party members can safely reside inside of it while using ranged attacks to take out your enemies. The only caveat to this spell is that in order to use the necrotic damage, you technically have to be an evil aligned character. However, even if you aren't evil aligned, you can still use the radiant damage, which is the superior damage type of the two anyway. But if you're playing an evil character, or your DM allows you to pick the damage type of the spell, this spell still takes number 1 spot on this list. It just has so much going on for it with very little to no downsides. And there you have it, the top 10 spells that deal necrotic damage. Did you agree or disagree with this list, or have any ideas for future topics similar to this one? If so, I'd love to hear about them down in the comments.